Lisa Lewin loved musicals. No, not the ones that directors were now stamping out, as if trying to plug plot holes with songs. She loved the Broadway masterpieces Cats, Les Miserables, Phantom of the Opera, West, Soviet History, My Fair Lady. Oh, how good they were. Lisa had watched them as a child and tears came to her eyes. She decided that she too would shine on stage. She would become an actress in such a musical, and her songs would touch people's hearts, making them laugh and cry. The childhood fantasy did not remain a dream. Lisa moved towards her goal, supported by her mom. At first, Lisa went to a private eminent vocal teacher. The girl was talented and did not waste her parents' money and the teacher's time in vain. Later, Lisa graduated from the Moscow Conservatory in pop singing. By this time, the young woman perfectly sang both classics and pop songs. She did not give up the idea of getting into a musical. The American production of Chicago was the one that impressed her the most. This musical was based on the true story of two celebrities. Ambitious risk-taking girls went to trial, but were acquitted, which gave a boost to the beginning of their careers. Lisa more than once imagined herself as a beautiful heroine, then Roxy Hart, then Willa Kelly. The woman even learned all the songs from there by heart. That she dreams of playing a prisoner, knew only one person in this world, which Lisa once trusted. I remember he even said she looked like Roxy Hart with her blonde curls, blue naive eyes, and a bull's eye counter. And so years later, Lisa was reminded of her dream again, only already in an ironic way. It's true what they say about being afraid of your dreams. For now, Lisa was in the main location of the musical Chicago in prison, only she didn't want to sing and dance. She wanted to cry nonstop. For a whole month that she was in the cell, the woman did not stop shedding tears into the pillow, unable to cope with the emotions that choked her at night. And what frightened the fragile blonde most of all was not the place she found herself in, but the fact that she was accused of something she had not done. Only no one in the world believed her. Now Lisa Lewin, nicknamed Candle by the local prisoners, stood in line for a meager breakfast. She already knew that she would limit herself to a slice of bread and butter, drinking tea without sugar. After all, the smell of oatmeal, which the cooks had managed to water down again, making it unsuitable for her stomach, was wafting throughout the dining room. Lisa knew in her mind that she needed to eat. She had lost 5 pounds in a month, and she was not particularly fat, having lost weight on the food here. As her neighbor Miranda Ogoniak, whose bunks were at the bottom, used to say. However, she had no appetite, and the presented dishes killed it altogether. "Make way and primary," muttered the blatant arrestee. Recognized by the local queen nicknamed Countess Camille, in addition to the beautiful tone pushed Lisa hard with her shoulder. She couldn't stand her left face, and the fact that the girl was from a good, even wealthy family. Lisa lowered her eyelashes and silently shunned, not intending to engage in a dialogue and come to an inevitable conflict, from which the loser will come out, taking her portion of gray, mush smeared on the plate. Lisa sat down in her seat, her cellmate sitting next to her, a former teacher already of Nancy's age. They called her Aunt Nancy or Mama Nancy and treated her with love. Opposite settled 2 girlfriends, the same Miranda Ogoniek, a sportswoman with a haircut under the boy, and next to a young Shaitan, who became a term for the fact that interrupted walking on the side of Muzhenko. The first days in the zone were given to Lewin Lisa with great difficulty. She remembered how it all began with the search, which was a total humiliation for her. The wardens did not demand nudity. They searched her hair, her mouth, made her bend over. Then the quarantine area. It was cold there, so we slept in beds 2 at a time. There was steam coming out of your mouth. The walls were scrolled with mats and prayers mixed in. Then prison began. Lisa was lucky to have a cell. The roommates were nice, though strange. At first Lisa thought she would go crazy in captivity, however one gets used to it. Here Lisa began to get used to the schedule, to the shouts of rising, to the local smells in the industrial rooms with barely warm water. Except that she still hated Thursday, which was known here as Naked Day. Then the door to the cell swung open, spreading all the shouting of the invigilator with "stripping all out, ladies." In this way, the administration checked if the prisoners had no marks from beatings, stains, infections, or fresh ones. Narcologist. Lisa was very helpful to Nancy. Lisa understood why she was fondly called Mom. The teacher treated the new girl like a daughter. The first night, as Lisa tried to muffle her sobs and sobbing with a pillow, Nancy got up from her seat and sat next to her. Lisa froze and then felt the older woman's hand touch her hair. She began to stroke her and softly sang a lullaby. To her voice, Lisa fell asleep. Later, Nancy taught Lisa the ins and outs of local life and the laws of the prison. Jenka joked that Nancy had been retrained from a schoolteacher to a guidance counselor. Nancy's aunt taught her that you should ask your relatives from prison for cigarettes in blocks. "I don't smoke at all," she was confused at the time. "You're doing the right thing. There's enough to ruin your health here." "But cigarettes in the zone are analogous to currency," explained Nancy. Jenka went further and for some reason told her cellmate something new. "A few ways to make a shiv. I do not advise to use it, but for peace of mind means of protection should have. Only for the master should be better hidden. I mean, Oganik told it with inspiration, or they'll start a search. If they find something, the extra will be sent to solitary confinement. You can take a dip in the local suite there. I was only there for 3 days, we bit all our nails. And if the shift falls on Efremova, you'll forget. She likes to mock the wrongdoer. She says that's how she corrects us. She can strip us down to our underwear, pour water on us, and make us sleep on the bare, icy floor." From Joanna, Lisa also learned various words such as Shaheen Mar, chatter, kippish. All in all, Lisa's vocabulary had unwittingly been enriched. The main advice from the woman in the cell, however, was to stay out of the way. They meant Miranda, although they didn't like her themselves. Now Miranda stretched her neck and tried to see who was making breakfast. "I knew it." "Oh shit," the woman said. Shoving a spoonful of porridge into herself, wrinkling her nose, stopped. "Eating. If you can't cook, then stay out of the kitchen. People have no conscience to feed slop. She can even spoil the water." Usually Lisa did not enter into conversation with her cellmates, immersed in her own thoughts. But today, however, she looked up from the bread, which she methodically decided instead of eating. "How does one get into the kitchen there?" she inquired. "Through connections, of course. I got my place in the kitchen thanks to the Countess's patronage." Miranda lowered her voice and nodded at another table. "Now our queen has her people everywhere, so she gets cakes and ingredients for porridge in the kitchen. She's got a sneaky one. You know what else she did? Messed up with our new security guard, Christopher. They clamp while everyone else is working. Now he's bringing his mistress all kinds of salts. She's got him all over the place. The worst thing is that he doesn't even realize the position he's in. If Katya opens her mouth and tells about their affair, he could be fired. If they believe him, of course. But who wouldn't believe the Countess? She can bring everyone to heel. What kind of bitch is she?" Miranda's tone made it unclear whether she was jealous of the Countess's position, afraid of her, or admiring her. Lisa decided it was all of the above. "I heard that the Countess had her eye on the new doctor and had forgotten all about Christopher. I didn't know it myself. But rumor has it that the new doctor, who's a handsome fellow, put her words in for the wretch. We girls don't usually like to complain about illnesses, because it's medicine that maims instead of cures. The last time Belikova complained about the pain of the experience, she had a tooth pulled. And what's wrong with that?" Lisa quirked an eyebrow, not understanding where the logic broke down. Miranda and Bale glanced over and giggled, satisfied that they could retell a local joke. It wasn't like she'd had her teeth ripped out, and without anesthesia. So she had 2 teeth missing at once. Good thing it wasn't in the front. One good thing, she changed her nickname right away. Now Belikova is our shark. She'd be happy to ban Gamova. That's why we're in no hurry to get into the hospital wing. If you say you have a stomachache, they'll cut out your kidney. Only now there will be a queue of suffering people. It's been a long time since we've had handsome men, only in pictures. Have you seen them? And this one can touch you if you don't bring countesses to him. The first." The girls giggled. Aunt Nancy looked at them judgmentally. Lisa blushed. She was having trouble getting used to the words of the local lingo. The Countess's chesty laughter echoed through the dining room, which caught Miranda's attention again. "Yes, our Countess needs everyone." A deck of trump cards is being assembled, poked a disgruntled light, porridge, and gnawed a piece of gray bread with exasperation. She knows how to twist her tail. If the Countess has an affair with the doctor, she will go to the infirmary like to a sanatorium, and then live on pills. Christopher can't cope with her demands, can he? Covenant was not surprised by such stories. She had already begun to get used to the local order and knew that many ladies from local prisoners have intimate relations with the prison staff. In this way, they hoped to receive special treatment and relaxation during their sentences. She was also aware that the Countess is the chief of substances in the zone. Except that the coveted medicines were not thrown over the fence and baked rolls were not handed to her. No bread. She used her employees for transit. "You taking them in?" Lisa heard the Countess was a former medical officer. She was serving time for selling counterfeit drugs and dealing in illegal substances. It was obvious that in prison she did not want to reform, but only improved her talents as a bargainer. Lisa involuntarily turned around and looked in the direction of the Countess. The prisoner was just behind Livis Courtling, and her minions were barely looking into the woman's mouth. Lisa thought that the Countess stood out very much from the rest of the prisoners. These women, though they tried to lid their eyes and lips, were still unconverted, menacing, somehow gray and unassuming. Their makeup reminded Lisa of a child's attempt at something that had fallen out of her mother's makeup bag. The Countess, on the other hand, was to match her nickname. Camille was tall, with fine facial features, a beautiful figure and soft-looking plump lips, which she painted every morning with scarlet lipstick. Except that these lips never smiled and all but slid teeth, and the look in her green eyes was evil, piercing, as if an X-ray machine was shining through. At some point, Lisa realized that this gaze was directed directly at her. The Countess raised her hand. It was Pyriev who ran his thumb along her throat, decorated with tattoos in the form of flowers. Caught Lisa turned pale and turned away abruptly, barely missing her nose, bumping into a plate of porridge. Miranda clucked her tongue. "She loves you, I see. She's got you close to her heart. Why wouldn't you two have crossed paths on the outside? Maybe you spit in her food? Or ha ha ha." I loved Lisa. Shook your head. "No, I don't know her. I don't know why she's always clinging," the girl admitted bitterly. The Countess had been giving Lisa a hard time ever since she arrived at the prison. She bullied, teased the prisoner, forced her to exhaust herself at work in the sewing shop, working above the norm. She also demanded money from Lisa for amenities for her own cell, citing that the inmates are wealthy parents who own a chain of restaurants. Lisa advised these. Nancy did not argue with the Countess, even shared the contents of her gear with her a couple of times with cosmetics, cigarettes, and provisions. Lisa hoped that the Count, having failed to fight back, would back off. Then Lisa couldn't stand one incident. It happened a week ago. The Countess, having learned that Lisa was a singer, ordered her to be dragged to her cell by her lackeys. There, the Countess, sitting businesslike on a thin, throne-like chair, ordered Lisa to climb on a stool and sing songs for her and her guests. Lisa refused to fulfill the role of court jester. She did not give in even when Shmeleva, the Countess's right hand, painfully grabbed her by the hair and repeated the order. The Countess considered Lisa's stubbornness to be a spit in the face, so she set out to spoil Lewin's life. She began by doing just that, and she ran over a woman. When Lisa was dragged into the cell that night and thrown to the floor, Nancy Soap's teacher came to her. Cleaned her up, shook her head, and asked, couldn't Lisa just sing? Lisa remained silent. She hates Vanessa because she saw a competitor in her. Christina willingly shared her thoughts, insisting the flash drive to her neighbor. "Lisa, you're a beauty. Christopher can't take his eyes off her. In fact, all the men around here look at her when she walks by. Even her grandfather, even though he hasn't had a hard-on in years. Then there's Lisa, the rich actress who was in the papers. Of course she's jealous." "What do you say, Lisa?" Lou and Miranda winked merrily. "It's on the Countess's, boys. I'm not interested in men," Lisa hastily blurted out, but remembering the rumors about women's colonies, fearfully added women too. "I've just been burned twice by relationships, and I don't intend to have any more." Lisa wasn't lying about her determination. Her first love had broken the girl's heart with a whimper. Her second love, in which she was just looking for an opportunity to forget herself, had sent the prisoner to jail. They announced the end of breakfast and allowed them to go out for a walk in honor of the day off. Lisa was just waiting for this opportunity to take a breath of air and look at the sun. She wanted to get up, but a hand came down on her shoulders, forcing her to sit down abruptly. "Stove, mole. Why haven't you eaten?" The Countess's hushed voice stitched, making Lisa covered in goosebumps. not to the taste of our exquisite dishes. "I'm not hungry," whispered Lisa, trying not to look into the face of her mother, whom she sincerely feared. "Maybe you don't like the way my friends cook?" Katya insisted. "You're used to foie gras and champagne for breakfast. Star Miranda, leave the girl alone." Nancy spoke up. "There's nothing to share." The teacher was one of the few people the Countess had any respect for, whether because of her age or because the teacher reminded the prisoner of her mother. However, now the woman did not want to back down either. "I'm just worried Aunt Nancy has relaxed. Count. She has become pale, thin, does not eat at all. And now the bowl of porridge is full. Not a spoonful has our princess sat down." Lisa, throwing back her head, looked into the woman's green eyes. Suddenly to herself, Lisa felt anger rising through her. It rose from her stomach and hit the blood in her head. "Why are you so interested in my plate?" she asked before she could take a bite. "You want to finish your tongue for me? Don't be shy. Tell me, am I not greedy? If you need to donate something, also come." She loudly ahed, whispered barely audible. "What a fool!" The others murmured. The Countess staggered for a brief moment of astonished rebuff in silence. She quickly pulled herself together, however. Lisa did not realize at what moment the bunny grabbed her by the hair and with a sharp movement pushed her face into the bowl of porridge. Oatmeal flew up her nose in a flash. Behind molding eyes, Lisa opened her mouth to take a breath, but the Countess didn't let her off the hook. Like a cat, she lunged at the singer. "Bitch," she sang out. "You still don't realize where you are. You're nobody here. So don't open your mouth in the wrong place." Lisa, whose vision was still obstructed from the mush on her face by the tire lash, tried to fight back by touch. However, the singer was hard to resist. Aggressive ex-bunnies. "You make up your mind. What should I do, silence or sing songs?" growled Lisa irritably. Fractured more and more. She'd only been in jail a month, but she'd learned things, like how to show her teeth. Lisa fiercely wiped the cold mush off her face, looked in the reddened face of the Countess, who was dragged away. Usually at this point, the bunny was already being stretched by the workers, except that Christopher the newcomer did not risk prying into her mistress. "I tolerated being measured next to her." "Can you even sing?" howled the Count. "The first read an article about you. They say you poisoned a talented girl because you couldn't do a damn thing yourself. She sang for you. That's what they say. And your family? Did she get money for it? Rich people can do anything, but it's a surprise, Major. We're all equal here. You're just like us. Heart in your chest." Lisa pounded furiously, sending hot, lava-like blood through her body. It rushed to her throat. Lisa didn't notice as she opened her mouth and sang. She sang hotly, passionately, as if she were on stage in the middle of a play. The bunnies, amazed, froze when they heard how beautiful it was, filled with emotion and color in the prisoners' voices. Lisa, on the other hand, looked into the eyes of therapist Kochka, who even had her mouth ajar. Lewin's eyes read the self-confidence she had been hiding before. "Morning, give me hope. I want to run after my dreams again, just like before." Lisa sang the words of the song that first came to her mind, Happiness from the musical Cats. When she finished, there was a strange silence, like in the hall during a play. Except that the artist was not expecting applause. "I'm better than you. And it's not even about the money," whispered Lisa at the end of her solo. She realized that she had made a fatal mistake. The Countess's nostrils flared. She lunged at her rival like a wildcat again. They tumbled onto the table, sweeping away the remains of their plates. Miranda winced with fright. Nancy was begging the girls to get back together. Only now the warden's whistles sounded. The Countess, covering the curse, was pulled away from the heavy breathers. Lewin, someone touched the face of Weather the Covenants, and she saw Christopher in front of her. "Are you all right, Lewin?" he asked with genuine concern. Lisa nodded confusedly. "I'm fine." However, the guard frowned, noticing the scratches on the girl's face. They counted and answered. "I'll take you to the infirmary," he said, helping her up and holding her elbow. "Stop." The car rumbled, the harshest of the wardens down. "Ifremova. Where is the instigator?" "It was not her fault," said Christopher confidently. The Count pounced on her. "I saw it." The Countess, who was already being led out of the dining room, taking under white hands, turned sharply. only she did not look at Christopher, that she was betrayed by Liza. It was the look that made Lewin's knees buckle. "What have I done? Idiot." The woman thought fearfully. At the hospital, Lisa followed the man on automatic. She didn't understand why he was being so kind, but she sensed that the guard's attentions would still bode trouble for her. When Lewin was brought to the medical wing, she was still in shock. Lisa had never been in a fight in her life, though more than a few bruises and abrasions. She was afraid of what she would answer for her stroppiness. "Sit here, Lewin. The doctor will be here in a moment," the guard said and touched Lisa's shoulder one last time. She tried not to twitch at his touch, though she was sure the man had held his hand too long. As Christopher walked out, Lisa heard his voice in the hallway. "Brought you a patient." "You should be careful there. She has a pretty face, you can't spoil it. We don't have many of those around here. And she sings like she gives me goosebumps," he said, whistling as he walked away. Lisa felt sick. Of course, all singers dream of recognition, but she didn't want that kind of attention. She lowered her face, hiding it behind her hair, which her adversary had sung to properly ruffle and whip into a crow's nest. She heard the doctor enter the office, then froze. A few more cautious steps in her direction, and then a short, like a heartbeat, Lisa. Barely did the woman hear the doctor's voice as her heart did, a somersault jumping up into her throat. She threw her head back, deciding that the rumor had played tricks on her. But then her eyesight was also in cahoots with him, failing her. For in front of her stood most definitely the man she had abandoned before her wedding. "What are you doing here?" she murmured, looking at the man with horror. Then, as if remembering that she had a prosecutor's mess in her tangled hair and was wearing a prison uniform, she turned away abruptly. Blushing thickly, Lisa clenched her teeth, ashamed of her position and appearance. "Amazing Lisa," she thought bitterly. "Have you found a way to surprise your first love?" Stephen looked beautiful, as handsome and statuesque as ever. It was not for nothing that the prisoners were as excited as if a fox had been let into the henhouse. It made Lisa feel even worse. "What happened?" asked the man. He came closer and leaned over to look at the patient. Of course, Lisa was going to go out of pride, but she couldn't. She was tired. And did she have the right to disobey the doctor? Stephen began to treat the wounds. His movements were gentle and careful. The man worked in silence. Lisa did not know where to look and finally looked at his face. "What are you doing here?" she asked, unable to stand the silence. "You used to work at the family clinic." Stephen looked briefly into her eyes. "I think your answer to that question would be much more interesting than mine," the doctor said reasonably. "How did you get here, Lisa?" Lisa shouted, "Didn't you read the papers?" "I poisoned my rival." Her husband's mistress, Lisa involuntarily snarled. Stephen, however, surprised her with a new question. "If I wanted to talk to journalists, I wouldn't be here, Lisa," he said. "What really happened?" Lisa looked at him with astonishment, but still with force. "Language." "You won't believe me," the prisoner said bitterly. "No one did." Stephen's hand froze. Then he threw away the vodka, flushed with blood. "Why are you like this?" Again he tried to make a dialogue. "Him." "For the pretty eyes," Lisa mumbled, not knowing what to say. Unexpectedly, Stephen smiled at her. "Then the occasion was a good one," the doctor remarked, sticking a band-aid on the patient's cheekbones. Lisa's heart clenched, then fluttered with a caught bird. She stared into her ex-fiancé's face, unwilling to look away. Stephen froze as well. It seemed that Stephen wanted to say something else, but Christopher returned to the office. He looked at both of them and said grudgingly, "That's enough, prisoner. It's time to go to the cell." On the way to the cell, Christopher struck up a conversation with Lisa. Although the woman was more silent, he hinted that he could make her life in prison easier. The man seemed to believe in himself when he contacted the Countess. Lisa, however, was not listening to him. Stephen's face stood before her eyes. She could still feel the man's cold fingers touching her face. While he was treating the scratches, Lisa suddenly realized that the usually collected Stephen had forgotten to put on his gloves. Whether from confusion or excitement, the thought made the warm woman furtively smile. All day Lisa had been diligently pushing away thoughts of Stephen and the past that bound them together, the wedding that never happened, the love that ended in her tears. The woman tried to distract herself, but as soon as the lights were turned off and the cell was silent, the memories came flooding back. There was no escape from them. Lisa sighed resignedly and turned on her side, covering her eyes. She thought about what had started only 3 years ago, though it seemed to her that the events were in a past life. Lisa had met Stephen while watching an old musical. They ended up in adjacent seats in the old movie theater. It was January, snowy, fabulous. During these days of the New Year's holidays, the Dawn movie theater was hosting an old movie marathon. Lisa adored this cinema, old and cozy. It had only 2 halls, but it had stayed afloat for what must have been half a century. Despite the fact that they had built multiplexes in nearby shopping centers, but in its heyday they decided to bribe the public with other things. For example, the floors with nightly screenings of classic movies, 1 ticket for a ball, catchy umbrellas, please, 5th row in the middle. Lisa asked the cashier. As she made her way to the movie rooms, Lisa saw that there weren't many people who wanted to watch the musical for a sleepover. 2 couples had taken kissing seats in the back row of everyone on either side of the auditorium. Obviously, they would be preoccupied with each other and not the pictures on the screen. A company of 4 girls and giggled softly. Elsewhere in the hall, Lisa had taken her place in the center and intended to be busy watching trailers and eating popcorn. However, as soon as the hall fell into a pleasant darkness, someone sat down next to her. Lisa, of course. Vita glanced at the person who had few empty seats. She didn't take a handful of air corn to her mouth because she was dumbfounded. The young man looked as if he had stepped out of a Hollywood movie screen in the light that poured from the screen, his face as pale as marble. A flash on the screen picked out a pronounced lip line, cheekbones, a shadow, and a downward address. Then everything faded again, plunging the viewers into darkness. However, Lisa could no longer take her eyes off her neighbor, and the man who had so unceremoniously violated her personal space was Stephen. Soon he would become her boyfriend, then her fiancé, and then he would break her heart into shards. But at this moment, the girl didn't know the future, she only saw his profile. Suddenly, Stephen turned to face her and looked directly into her eyes, smiling openly as if they were longtime friends. The screen there noticed he jabbed a finger toward the screen where the trailers were spinning. Or I'm more interesting. Lisa blinked, startled, and twitched, turning sharply, scattering sweet ship popcorn all over the floor of the movie theater. A wormy, reddened neck. The girl squinted at the stranger, who looked extremely pleased. It was just interesting to see a person who in a huge empty hall decided to find a neighbor. Why did you sit here? Out of embarrassment, Lisa immediately went on the offense. Because 2 lonely people shouldn't sit in different corners of the theater, especially when they're watching an old musical. It's not healthy. I'm telling you as a doctor, he responded, not the least bit embarrassed at the stranger. What makes you think I'm single? Maybe I'm waiting for a boyfriend. Lisa was indignant, blushing. Stiffened looked into her eyes again. A slight, charming smile was on his lips. If he lets such a charming girl wait for him, what kind of guy is he? He raised an eyebrow. Lisa tried to sneer some more. However, she soon gave up. The onslaught of the guy's insolent charm and his imperturbability. Soon the young people were already discussing the movie, joking and eating popcorn, losing it from their buckets. A friend of a friend, apparently, and he assured that the best thing is to eat 2 kinds at the same time, a combination of sweet and salty. It's a perfect pairing, he remarked, stealing his neighbor handfuls of ship's snacks. So not only are you a doctor, but you're also a foodie. Lisa, why didn't you buy both flavors then? I was hoping to meet the sweet popcorn man, and I wasn't wrong. He winked at Lisa, causing her to flush again. Maybe it was fate when their fingers made contact on the popcorn bucket. The girl felt a flock of butterflies circling in her stomach, tickling her ribs with their thin wings. She didn't think she'd ever felt it before. After the movie, the young people walked the city streets, drinking cocoa, until dawn painted the high-rise buildings in shades of orange and pink. Lisa thought that it had been a long time since she had laughed for so long that even her stomach ached and tears ran to her eyes every now and then. Stephen was incredibly easy for her to be with. She felt as if she could talk to him about anything, as if he were a random fellow traveler on a train she would never see again. She did not realize at what point she had time to tell the guy that she dreamed of playing a major role in the musical Chicago. And when she told him that her birth father had died in a car accident and her mom had married her best friend, which became her stepfather, Stephen was also candid. He turned out to be a young, aspiring doctor. He told Lisa that the idea of becoming a doctor came from his parents, whom he respected immensely and did not want to disappoint. Stephen also had a younger sister, Molly, whom everyone called Molly for some reason. Lisa did not understand why this beautiful, sweet girl took the name of the famous demon from the myths. However, she soon realized that such a name is just right. Fits the twosome and the girl. Lisa was enchanted by Stephen at first sight. In love. From the second date, she introduced her boyfriend to her mother and stepfather. A month into the relationship, her parents accepted the potential son-in-law as their own son. And Lisa's younger brother, Jenka, adored Stephen. Of course, when Stephen, after a year of relationship, got down on one knee and proposed marriage, Lisa Summer did not think over the answer. A confident, full of happiness, yes came off her lips. She hugged her fiancé without noticing the change in his gaze. And so the big day had come. Lisa and Stephen were to be married. The guests were already wandering around the country mansion, rented for the whole weekend. The registry clerk stood at the arch and discussed the nuances of the ceremony with the organizer. Yes, it was here, by the silvery lake, stroked by white-pink lilies floating in the water. Lisa and Stephen decided to marry and take a vow of love and fidelity. Lisa, picking up her skirt, ran down the hall. She had a sly smile on her lips. She had escaped from the supervision of her bridesmaids and mother. She kept her course for the room reserved for the groom to steal a kiss from him before the ceremony began. Lisa didn't believe in omens, so the thought of the groom seeing her before the wedding in the bride's white dress didn't scare her. She really wanted to see her lover and future husband. Except that barely the girl, having enlisted, ran to the right door, behind which the future husband was hiding. She was forced to feel the influence of omens. The bride's slender fingers touched the round knob, but she did not turn it at once. The bride froze as she heard the argument outside the door. "You have no right to give up," the girl said. "Stephen, you must see it through." "Isn't that what you're a naive fool for?" "Don't say that about Lisa," asked Stephen. "What, Stephen, have you forgotten who she is? You've forgotten who she is? You've forgotten who's really always been on your side. You have to tell her the truth. Leave her at the altar, make her suffer for yourself, for your mother's memory." "Have you forgotten?" "Of course not." "I just can't, Molly, you can't." "Then I will. Let's see if she'll be just as in love with you if she finds out the whole truth about us without giving herself credit." Lisa yanked open the door, swinging it open. Behind her she saw Stephen and Molly. The brother held his sister by the arm, hovering over her. "Lisa, I won't say anything for," growled Stephen in a tone that Lisa had never heard from him before. "And you understand me too?" Everything changed. Molly shielded her eyes, but then her gaze darted behind her fiancé's back. At first she was surprised, but then her beautiful lips stretched into a satisfied chuckle. "Too late, kin," she declared, pulling her arm out of her older brother's grasp. Stephen turned around sharply at the entrance. When he spotted the bride frozen there in her splendor, he was dazed for a moment, at first struck by the beauty of his beloved, who was like the lower snowdrop flower that first emerged from the frozen ground after Earth's winter. Thin, pale, fragile, trembling in the wind. But was there still hope for warmth in those who spotted it? It did not take Stephen long, however, to admire Lisa's beauty. He noticed with what horror she was looking at him. "How much have you heard?" He exhaled, frightened. It didn't matter how much she had heard. What mattered was how much she had to learn. Molly giggled, peeking out from behind the man's shoulder. Lisa had a smug look on her face, like a cat with a lunging canary. Molly leaned defiantly on her brother's shoulder, keeping her gaze on Lisa. The brunette pulled up and whispered something in his ear. He grimaced, trying to pull away. "Stephen," whispered the bride, confused, frightened. "What's going on? What's going on between you two?" "Listen, Lisa." The man rushed toward her, but Lisa was in a hurry. "No. Don't touch me. I want to know first. Tell her," exclaimed Molly with her hands. Her black eyes sparkled and a mocking smile appeared on her lips. "She must know the truth. You love her, don't you? Since you're so good, here's no need to start your marriage with lies." "Dear little brother." "Shut up, Molly." Stephen snapped at her. Lisa felt a crust of ice forming inside her. This thin ice seemed to break with every breath she took. Built. The babies fit into her lungs from the inside out. The bride put a hand to her rib cage because the physical were real, not phantom. The corset seemed too tight for her. There wasn't enough air. "Lisa, have you gone pale?" scared Stephen, taking a step toward her. One more attempt to touch the bride. "No, don't touch me," repeated Lisa years ago. "Speak." Of course, in the girl's mind already makeup to make the explanation horrible and hurtful must be. Molly was not his sister. They'd been cheating on her, having an affair behind her back all this time. Gross. That's so gross. "What are you two? Lovers?" the white bride to herself. A silence hung, broken by the woman's hysterically obnoxious laughter. Molly wiped a tear from the corner of her eye before replying. "You'd like it better, baby." Trying to catch her breath, she said. Such words confused Lisa even more. She looked confusedly into Stephen's face, which appeared lost. Finishing it, demanded Molly abruptly cut short her own mirth. Then she, high-heeled, left the room. The bride and groom were left alone. Lisa was looking into her lover's face. He, on the contrary, averted his gaze. "It will be a long and unpleasant conversation," Stephen said, looking out of the window. "We can postpone it. I beg you." "No," Lisa shook her head emphatically, clenching her fists and shifting the folds of the delicate fabric in her fingers. "Tell me what she meant." Stephen licked his lips, then hooked his fingers into his hair, just perfectly styled. Resolved, the man straightened his shoulders and looked into his bride's face with a heavy Kyrie look. Lisa didn't like the eye. It did not bode well. "You promise me you'll listen to the end and try to understand me without jumping to conclusions. You're in no position to set conditions." Lisa's mouth batted, but once again, at Stephen's struggling look, she nodded reluctantly. "Okay, I'm listening." Her heart was pounding as fast as if she were rolling in a roller coaster car. And she had no idea if the next second would be a rise, a fall, or icy water. "Our meeting was no accident," Stephen said in a tone devoid of emotion, as if he were reading me an interesting story. "Then in the movie theater, I didn't just sit next to you. I knew your name, I knew your habits, all your friends, the things you like. Autumn more than any other season. What kind of coffee do you drink? Pumpkin latte in cold weather and coffee with orange juice in the heat. Knew all of them. I followed you to that movie theater too, knowing how much you loved that movie. But if you hadn't come that night, I would have found another way to meet you." "But why?" Lisa whispered as the silence dragged on. Stephen looked into her eyes with a short grin that had too much sadness in it. "You do realize why, don't you? To get us here." He spread his hands, glancing around the beautiful room, "so that you'd fall in love with me as hard as you could. To agree to marry me." Everything the groom told her further reminded Lisa of a terrible nightmare, not a harsh reality. Stephen had come into Lisa's life to ruin it. He had taken on the ridiculous role of avenger, blaming her for sins she had not committed. "Remember you told me about your father and his tragic death?" Stephen said softly, as if it hurt to force the words out of his throat. "You said he was in the car with another woman. But I left out one important detail. She was his mistress, right?" "How do you know?" whispered Lisa, who had actually kept such an embarrassing truth from her fiancé's family. Her dad had died in a traffic accident and her mistress was sitting next to him. Her mom, upon learning of this, was almost depressed. At once, two news about the death and betrayal of her husband knocked the air out of her lungs. However, next to her all the time was Vadim's best friend, who in the future became Lisa's stepfather. The man supported them, protected them. Over time, they tried to forget about the past. However, it knocked on the door again, and it was done by someone from whom Lisa did not expect it. Stephen looked into Lisa's face before he shocked her with the truth. Her name was Svetlana, and she was my mom. Lisa let out a convulsive sigh, her eyes widened with shock. Stephen, however, did not finish his confession. "Did you know that our parents were in accidents for a reason? Your father was a dishonest man who built his business on blood. His competitors decided to get rid of him." He looked into Lisa's eyes. "It was a contract killing. Your company was taken away from you right away, remember? Except it was your father who had to suffer, not my mother. She was a woman in love, and a naive fool. But people shouldn't die for that, you know?" Stephen took a couple of steps to the window, looking outside. The guests were already seated on beautiful white chairs decorated with ribbons. The bridesmaids were handing out ice-colored confetti for the guests to shower on the newlyweds. Live music was playing. Guests drank champagne and enjoyed desserts and appetizers in anticipation of the holiday. However, this celebration seemed unreal to Lisa, as if it was not a couple of steps away from them, but in another world. Lisa looked at Stephen's profile. She remembered the first time she saw him and fell in love. Just like that, at first sight, like in ridiculous novels. She felt Stephen had not finished his confession, and she was right. After the truth about my mother's affair came out, my father lost his peace and sanity, Stephen pronounced, indifferently looking at the beautifully dressed guests' flashing smiles. My mother was an artist of the night, creative. Like a brightly colored bird, she could wake up in the middle of the night and paint the walls in the hallway because inspiration struck her. Mom always smelled like paint and her beautiful hands were dirty. Dad was a down-to-earth man, an ordinary mechanic who smelled of fuel oil. However, he adored his wife more than anything else in the world. They were happy, as I remember. And then when Mom was gone, he lost the meaning of life. Later, he read her diaries. She wrote about her lover and how he wouldn't let her leave. Your father threatened her, you know. Stephen rubbed his lips and continued. Dad was angry and heartbroken. He started drinking his anger and he took his pain out on me. You know, I'm a lot like Dad. The only thing I got from my mother was my eyes. But he wouldn't see it that way. He shouted in my face, sputtering, nauseated, greasy saliva and breathing booze that I was not his son. He convinced me that my mother had me on the side. He abused me every single day. Chased me out of the house, even in the cold, with no clothes on. When Daddy was sober, he would hold me, rocking me like a baby, crawling on his lap, crying, begging me to forgive him. And then it would happen all over again. I was living in hell, and to be honest, I looked at my dad's face, which used to always glow and smile, but I didn't recognize him. I thought my dad was gone, and someone else had taken his place, like a demon that possessed people. Stephen shook his head, and the corner of his lip quivered as if he wanted to. He grinned at the childish fantasy, but he couldn't. Later, one of the neighbors called the child welfare authorities. They came for me, but I did not want to leave. I remember that I cried and touched them, but they took me away. At first I lived in the hospital. A psychologist was in constant contact with me. Then I was sent to an orphanage. My father was forbidden to see me. They said he was a bad influence on me. I think that's what the psychologist decided. I fought a lot and was withdrawn. And then when my dad lost everything, well, he was gone too. They found him in my mom's workshop. Me? I'm sorry. Lisa struggled to hold back the sobs that burst from his chest. But tell me, was it my fault? What did you want to do to me, Stephen? Stephen shook his head. I don't know, Lisa, he admitted honestly. Your father set it all in motion, you know. He started it first. Pulled the card out of the paper house of someone else's happiness, making it crumble. I hated him my whole life. I couldn't hate my father. Molly him, my mother. She shouldn't have died. I couldn't take revenge on your father, but I could on his daughter. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, trying to comprehend what she was hearing. Stephen continued in a tone devoid of color. I didn't decide to do it right away, though. I tried to forget honestly, tried to live another life. I even had the perfect chance to do so. I was adopted by the Plotnikov family. Their adult children are rarely taken home. I didn't expect such a miracle, but I was lucky enough to end up in a hospital. John came there on business. I don't know why he liked me, but the doctor's heart went out to me. He and Adriana adopted me. They couldn't have children, but when I ended up in their home, Adriana found out she was pregnant. I remember when they told me they were expecting a baby, I went to the nursery and started packing. When John and Adriana came in, they were genuinely surprised, asking where I was going. I replied that they didn't need someone else's baby now that they were expecting their own. And then she cried and started hugging me. You know, they're great parents. However, I never got to call them mom and dad. I didn't want to betray my own parents. He rubbed his forehead as if hoping to smooth out the wrinkles. I began to live a fake, puppet life, as if I were playing someone else's role, Stephen confessed, remembering his past. In general, I was just trying to repay the family that had taken me in, to justify their trust, so I was the perfect big brother to Molly. For Adriana and John, I tried to be a model son, became captain of the soccer team, graduated high school with a gold medal, then enrolled in medical school to work at John's clinic. But you and your family never left my mind. I couldn't find happiness in anything, you know. Yet I honestly tried to forget about it, to put you all out of my mind, until I went to one damn concert. Lisa looked into her fiancé's face, met his gaze. He was devastated, doomed. I saw you on stage. You were performing at a student celebration, singing songs from Romeo and Juliet, standing in a black dress. Its shiny fabric glowed like the scales of a fish in the spotlight. I recognized you immediately because I've followed your family's life at times. From that moment on, something inside me snapped, broke. I started thinking about you all the time. Stephen exhaled hotly. I started looking for information about you. That's when I found out you were studying to be a singer. Found out that your mother was happily in her second marriage, that you had a younger brother. I found out you own a chain of restaurants. Thanks to what? Damn it, Lisa, I became obsessed with you, you know. After what I'd been through, I thought you had no right to be happy. I wanted to do something to get back at you. And when I gave everything to Molly, she convinced me that the best revenge for a girl is to break her heart, to dump her in front of everyone at the wedding. Lisa turned pale. Realizing what awaited her, she felt sick and dizzy, so she abruptly rested her hand against the wall. Stephen, shifting in his face, rushed to his bride's aid. Lisa, are you okay? Are you kidding me? She shrieked. Ari, how can I be okay after what I've heard? You lied to me, you always have. Then Molly's face appeared before Lisa's eyes, smirking. So you're step-siblings then? Lisa asked, feeling like a fool. If she was interested in such questions after such revelations, she wasn't looking at you like a brother, Stephen. The man was embarrassed. There's nothing between us. She's my sister, nothing more. He denied Lisa's conjecture. I wasn't going to bring Molly into this, but she and I have been close since she was born, so there are no secrets. She was helping me. Molly loves too much. Intrigue and romance. I told her today that things have changed. I can't do that to you. Only Molly was hit by a car, a spoiled girl. She didn't accept that outcome. That's what you saw. I can't believe it, whispered Lisa, fighting the incoming nausea. Blood pounded in her head. Her pulse pounded in her temples. You may not believe me, but now looking back, I began to realize why I was obsessed with you. You blinded me when you stood on stage. You made my head spin. I fell in love with you, Lisa, I swear. Stephen passionately confessed his feelings. I fell in love at first sight, but I knew I had no right to feel that way about the daughter of my worst enemy. I began to hate myself for my weakness, to despise myself. I thought I was weak, so I decided to prove that I was stronger than such emotions. I thought I was doing the right thing, that I'd feel better if I made you just as miserable. Then everything would be fair. Well, whispered Lisa, struggling to manage the dizziness and stand up straight. You've done it. Bravo. Did you make it? Stephen. A look of despair appeared on the groom's face. You promised to listen to me to the end. He exclaimed. Everything had changed. Lisa, I really did love you with all my heart. Only Lisa didn't believe him anymore. She shook her head, taking her heart from the so sweet and desirable words of the man she had come to love. It turns out I don't know you. Stephen, if our first meeting was a carefully planned performance, how much truth was there in your words, your promises, our relationship? No, the man I fell in love with, he would never do that. She turned away, wanting to leave this room as quickly as possible, to get that idiotic dress off. Stephen, however, rushed toward the bride and grabbed her arm, yanking her toward him. Lisa had unable to steady herself on her thin heels. Her back hit the groom's chest, and he immediately hugged her tightly from his soft arm, as if he'd walked into a trap. No, please, I beg you, give me a chance. Yes, it all started with a lie. If it hadn't, I would have met you in a different way, Lisa. I love you. Do you hear me? I love you. Lisa's heart clenched. Stephen's hands trembled. Lisa didn't want to show him her tears. Now, however, she couldn't stand it. Hot, large drops slid down her cheeks, smearing her mascara and blush. She remembered when the makeup artist had conjured up Lisa's face this morning like a fairy godmother. she'd remarked that a bride's makeup had to be durable to withstand many tears of happiness. Obviously, with tears. Grief, disappointment. The makeup was impossible to fight. "Let go, horse," uttered the girl with a clap of her hands. The men only squeezed harder against her chest with their backs. Lisa could feel Stephen's heart beating hard, as if it were ready to jump out, to burst through his chest. How she wanted to believe him, but she couldn't. "Let go," she yelled with a shriek, coming forward. She managed to break free of the groom's grip, but the bride got tangled in the hem of her dress, falling to the floor. Stephen rushed to her, but Lisa, already openly sobbing, screamed in his face, "Stop, don't touch me, go away. I don't want to see you ever again. It's over, do you hear me? It's over." Stephen leaned toward her, opened his mouth and said, "Wake up." The warder yelled without hitting the cell door. "Wake up and you'll be tucked in." Lisa opened her eyes abruptly, popping up on the bed. Nancy looked at her in surprise and, seeing that arrogant, tear-wet face, shook her head regretfully. Lisa hastily wiped away her tears, muttered and guiltily, "I had a bad dream." The teacher did not comment on it. Lisa got up from her seat to start a new day, as gray as all the previous ones. At breakfast, she noticed the inmates squinting at her and whispering. She understood why this was happening. The Countess was not at breakfast, and Lisa turned to Miranda softly. "What about the Count?" Miranda, having almost entirely stuffed a boiled egg into her mouth, waved her hand, inhaling while she and Efrimov were sent to the isolation ward for fighting. "Christopher stood up for you." Voices, apparently, "Put the catcher," grumbled, and she with a stuffed mouth. "What happens when the Count comes out? I don't know. Pray, prepare your shiv, as I taught you." Lisa turned pale and pushed the buckwheat porridge away with trembling hands. However, this time Nancy moved the plate back. She looked at Lisa sternly. "What a mess. Eat, come on." She was right about one thing. Your skin and bones left to gain strength. They'll come in handy. Another week, which the Count spent in solitary confinement, passed quietly. Lisa kept hoping to see Stephen again, but the doctor never showed up. When Miranda came out, Lisa thought that she would immediately attack her. However, the Count now avoided fighting in public. Another week passed, which seemed to be the calm before the storm. One Saturday before the fight, Aunt Nancy approached Lisa with a request. "Blue, we can swap with the schoolboys for the night." Lisa was surprised and shrugged her shoulders. "Why not?" "Only why would you want to?" "Mine isn't the least bit more comfortable. It sags at the bottom like a hammock. I have to measure in a certain position to fall asleep," the woman admitted. "That's all right," Nancy waved her hand, smiling gently. "Just want to sleep there tonight. Give it a try." "Old, I've got a quirk already. I feel like the air has a cold pull on my side." Then the teacher lowered her voice and, leaning closer to Lisa, added, "Yes, and God, they say, is always fidgeting over me. No strength. She's restless. Squeaks and squeaks. Maybe you can handle her a little easier." Lisa didn't argue. She was in a wonderful mood. Today was bath day. The water was almost hot. Lisa could relax and wash away her fatigue. Oh, and they said there would be a doctor's checkup tomorrow. Lewin couldn't wait to meet Stephen. She felt ridiculous, but she'd even borrowed some lip gloss and mascara from Ogniak, intending to put on makeup before her visit to the infirmary. Katya didn't touch her, which was a relief. The only problem was Christopher wouldn't let her go. Lisa, getting ready for bed, brushed her long blonde curls and hummed a song. Nancy looked at her and suggested, "You could have your hair braided. I haven't done it in a long time." Lisa smiled broadly, "Sure." She sat down on the floor next to the bed. "Aunt Nancy." The older woman's hands began to pull the strands, weaving them together. Lisa covered her eyes in pleasure. Nancy, on the other hand, suddenly said, "You know, Lisa, I haven't told you why I'm sitting here, and not many people know. Everyone only guesses and scratches their tongues. I've heard all sorts of things about myself from the locals. You want to know the truth?" "Sure." Lisa nodded, surprised by this revelation. "I had a daughter named Wendy. Did you know she looked just like you? Look at her." The woman, holding Lisa's hair with one hand, reached under her pillow and pulled out a photograph. She held it out. Lisa saw a smiling young girl. It seemed to be a student, or even a high school student. Except that Lisa couldn't find any common features between them. except that her hair was the same long, blonde color. Beautiful, Lisa smiled. The girl's mother smiled softly, too. The picture was mint-salted. It was obvious that the photo was often held in their hands. No longer is she my Galushka, Nancy quietly confessed. Though Lisa already understood what the woman was getting at, hearing the pain in her words was hard. And knowing that the cute little girl from the photo was no longer living was hard, too. "I'm sorry," Lisa said, gently tucking the picture back in its place. "Children shouldn't have to leave us." Nancy sighed heavily and nodded. Wendy wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Did she like children? She was like me. I used to take her to school with me a lot. She used to sit in the back because her husband was away on business. So she liked it, Nancy told me as she styled Lisa's hair. She got into the institute on a budget. When they went to celebrate, they got her drunk. Drunk exactly I had her myself, a girl simple, honest, naive. A major there abused her. Lisa shuddered involuntarily. Nancy continued, when my daughter came home, I'd already alerted the police, the neighbors. I'd never seen her late before. And then she didn't even call. My heart was troubled, even though the police said that the student had been out on a bender. Then the woman overshadowed Vasha, then came back in the morning. I didn't recognize the Valentine then. Her dress was torn. She came barefoot, her feet chipped by a road stone. Her hair. What did I do to her before I left? I was upset. She looked at me without emotion, didn't cry, even told me everything straight. "And you had the same eyes when you first came in here?" Empty, scary. Nancy let out another long breath. Her voice trembled. It must have been a long time since she'd shared her story with anyone. We tried to bring the major to justice. It was a nightmare. He assured us, and his friends were pushing him, that Vasya had jumped into his arms herself, that she herself had been drinking, that she herself had started the whole thing, so that the money of passion in the institute would make fun of her, mocked her, said that it was her own fault. Aunt Nancy interrupted the story. "I've finished with your hair." Lisa turned to face her, touched her hands to her hair, which the woman had poured into something intricate. "Thank you, Aunt Nancy," she smiled. The woman sat down for a moment, seeing Lisa's face, which was now no longer hidden by her long hair. She touched her cheek with tenderness as well. Her fingers trembled. "Do you really look like her? But you're stronger. You'll get through this. No matter how much you're hurt, don't give up on the blue," she said emphatically. Then her gaze abruptly faded, lost its luster. My daughter couldn't handle the pressure. She couldn't handle the shame. She left me a farewell letter, apologizing. Then they found her body in the river. Lisa felt Nancy's pain as her own. She reached forward and gently put her arms around the woman's narrow shoulders. Nancy lowered her head gratefully. The perpetrator of all this came to me then, asking me what I wanted for my silence. And I wanted only one thing, that my daughter should live longer. I would have given my life for it. Only he couldn't fulfill my wish. "How did you end up here? Did you do something to him?" Lisa wondered. Aunt Nancy grinned slyly. "You know there is no dirtier person than an angry mother. Next, did you get it right? I was disillusioned with justice and decided to settle the score with my own hands. Except all I wanted was a confession, But when I went to him, this guy, he laughed at me, and at my Golubkina too. God rest her soul. Then I couldn't stand it and pushed him through the open window. He crawled out of the second floor, only he survived. I still ended up in here for attempted murder. His father hired the best lawyers to hide me." Lisa shook her head, thinking how unfair the world was. Nancy, meanwhile, took her daughter's picture in her hands, stroked it with her fingers. "I couldn't save my daughter. I might at least save another poor soul," muttered the woman, looking at the photo. She hastily wiped her tears, fearing they would drip on the photo. "And what about your husband?" Remembered another character in Lisa's story. "He's waiting for me." "The old stump," Nancy said fondly. "He writes letters. She says he won't die until we see each other." Lisa smiled. She thought that her spouse had not been spoiled with attention this month, although Lisa didn't expect a letter from him. Unless it was the divorce papers. The idyll between Nancy and Lisa was interrupted by the voice of Ogniak, who returned to their cell. "Holy shit, Maxim!" exclaimed Miranda, seeing Lisa's hairdo. Nancy's mom, I want a beauty like that too. Your hair is short. I can only put a bow on top, the woman said with a good-natured smile. Miranda started to laugh jokingly. Lisa looked in her pocket at the mirror for the first time. She smiled, noticing how beautiful Nancy's hands had made her. Aunt Nancy, can you plate me tomorrow too? Lisa blurted out involuntarily before the doctor's examination. Nancy suddenly laughed with the answer. Miranda sputtered. Why are you getting ready for a date with a doctor like that? Primary joined her with suspicion. Luckily for Lisa, they announced it was time to call it quits. Although Oganek flicked her neighbor on the nose, she promised to return to this interesting topic. At night, Lisa fell asleep on Nancy's bed with her hand tucked under her pillow. She felt the rectangle of the photo with her fingers and realized that the woman had left a picture of her daughter. Lisa felt immensely sorry for the girl and her mother, yet she still felt a kind of mental uplift. She thought for the first time that her life was going to work out. With these thoughts, she fell asleep. In the middle of the night, Lisa woke up to a strange noise. Her sleep was still responsive in a place that was foreign to her. The woman opened her eyes. The cell was dark, but she caught shadows, as if someone was moving. At first, she thought Miranda or Bale stood up. Then there was a whisper, but the voices were foreign forces. Keep your mouth shut so you don't take any chances. Groaning footsteps, the creak of springs quelled. A groan of pain, another. All this Lisa at first took as part of a dream, stubbornly unwilling to wake up. It was the woman who had put everything to sleep. Yes, answered she, so sang her beauty. And then Lewin was struck on the head as if by a blow. She jumped up sharply in her seat, looking after the people who were leaving their cell, and hurried to lock the door behind them. Stop, she shouted. Hearing her stranger's voice, everyone dropped and rushed on. Lost to the smart hallway, Lisa threw off the blanket, rushing to Nancy's bed. She touched her shoulder, turning her toward her. Nancy's aunt called out. She was beginning to shake with fright. Aunt Nancy. The woman didn't answer. In the darkness, Lisa's hand felt something hot and sticky. She squealed and then yelled, Miranda, Christina, get up. Lisa rushed to the door, pounding on the bars with her bare hands. Security, security. We need a doctor. We need a doctor now. There was an uproar. The lights came on. There was a rush. Lisa sat on the floor of the cell, shaking with terror. She was looking at the pale Nancy. She noticed now that her hair, usually gathered, was loose. This was how Lisa of color had slept. The woman was wearing a warm touloup, which helped a little to protect her from her attackers. An investigation began. Lisa was questioned more than once, but she answered only what she knew. She did not give the names of those she suspected. Miranda and Christina forbade her to talk about it. Her friends that night slapped Lewin's cheek so hard it hurt, and they demanded, Don't you dare knock. Do you hear me? Don't talk about the Countess. How could I? Lisa argued, clenching her shaking hands into a fist. There, Nancy. Nancy's mother lay in your place because she knew about the plans of those skins before anyone else, Miranda parried, looking hard into Lisa's eyes. Make sure her sacrifice is not in vain. I see, they're a key somewhere on the ball. Not enough for you. You want to walk out of here with your feet up? Lisa didn't want to. Now she was really afraid. Miranda count. How the 2 days passed, Lisa didn't remember. She was afraid of everything. She even slept with one eye open. Miranda and Bale had taken pity on her and started to be on duty in her cell so she could get some sleep. Lisa didn't understand why they were so kind, but she was grateful. On the third day, during a walk, Lisa was approached by the man she had dreamed of seeing. Stephen walked briskly across the site and nodded to Lisa. Lewin, come with me. All the tests were taken on Sunday. Did you testify? No, lazy. I have to close my charts, said the doctor in a deliberately businesslike tone. Under the stares of strangers, he led Lisa into the building. Would you have sent someone else? She said reproachfully. My life is not easy enough as it is. And when you're seen with you, I'm a mess. Is Nancy awake? Stephen interrupted her. Thought you'd want to see her. She asked and caught you. She nodded, averting her gaze. They hurried to the medical wing. There the woman rushed to the bed on which a pale Nancy lay. Lisa took her hand, pressed that one to her lips. "How are you?" "I'm fine. We were lucky with the doctor. He's got the best hands." "I don't know how he got here." Nancy looked at Stephen with a bright smile. He, coughing, tactfully said, "I'll leave you to it." Lisa asked the patient, "Why did you do that?" "They came to see me," she said bitterly. "That's why I decided to do it. I heard them discussing their outing. They wouldn't just leave me alone. I know they will now." "But we should have asked the guards for help." Nancy smiled. "Do you still believe in their help?" The older woman said bitterly, "You are a bright soul, Lisa." A lump appeared in Lisa's throat. She squeezed the woman's hand tighter. "Didn't I tell you how I came to be here?" she whispered. "Would you like to hear my version, not the one in the papers?" Nancy nodded. "You don't have to, but I want to," insisted Lisa, and licked her lips. "Trying to get my thoughts together so you can understand me. I'll start from afar. I was once madly in love. This man was my first true love. However, his feelings turned out to be. Then my heart was broken. The pain of it was so intense that I made the huge mistake of rushing into the arms of the first person who opened his arms for me, comforting me. I don't know if I wanted revenge on my ex-fiancé or to save myself, but I did what I did." Nancy weakly squeezed Nancy's fingers as if comforting. Lisa continued, "Robert was a friend of mine. We'd known each other since we were students at the Art Institute. He became a young and successful director, directing plays, operas, musicals. And I was a singer, but I dreamed of playing in a musical. Of course, I always saw him as a friend. I didn't like him at all. I guess that's why I paid the price. I thought if my mom could find comfort with her friend, so could I. Like they say, you'll always love him. But I never did." Nancy listened attentively, though Lisa realized that her stories were confusing and incomprehensible. She took a breath, however, and continued more measuredly. "I married Robert right after the wedding went off. It was only a month, and I still remember the strange sensation when I kissed him for the first time. I could feel his lips, his hands, his breath. But at the same time, my soul was silent. Like a lady not eating, my heart wasn't fluttering. There were no butterflies in my stomach. I knew he loved me. I let him. I didn't cheat. I didn't hurt him, but he still only got worse around me," Lisa confessed. "One day I got the lead role in his new musical. The critics predicted it would be a furor. There was also a lot of gossip that I became a prima donna because I was the director's wife. But that wasn't true. I prepared for the performance by giving myself to the stage. I felt like the stage was the only thing I had left. That's when I met Vanessa Alford, a girl who loved my husband much more than I did." In telling her story to Nancy, Lisa herself replayed these events in her head. She remembered Vanessa's face so naive, like a child's huge blue eyes, curved eyelashes, blonde hair the color of wheat, thin arms. She looked like an angel. Vanessa was from an esteemed family. Her parents were hereditary aristocrats. The girl became Lisa's understudy. She would play the lead in a musical if something happened to Lisa. However, Lisa sincerely believed that there was no enmity between them. On that unfortunate day, during the dress rehearsal, Vanessa complained of a sore throat in the dressing room. Lisa offered her tea, which she prepared herself. In such cases, Vanessa drank the drink. Soon the girl was hospitalized, diagnosed with poisoning. Suspicion, of course, fell on Lisa. At first, few people believed it. However, soon the details became clear. It turned out that Vanessa and Robert were lovers. The man, however, was not going to leave his wife for Vanessa. They continued the affair behind her back, staying in the theater longer than the others, locked in the dressing room. Lisa was the only one who didn't notice. She didn't notice her husband at all. Of course, members of the media clung to such a savory news as a tidbit. They began to make conjectures, bringing them one on top of the other. It was said that Vanessa's voice was used by Lisa to make her way on stage. The big news, however, was Vanessa and Robert's affair. They decided that the woman had taken out a stage rival and a rival in love. At first, Lisa believed that everything would be resolved peacefully, but already at the trial, she faced the harsh reality and betrayal. "How did poison end up in your injuries?" Vanessa's lawyer, hired by her parents, asked. "I don't. My honor always rests on a shelf in the shared dressing room." "Anyone could have," she muttered confusedly. "Why didn't you have tea yourself that evening?" he added. "You love it, don't you?" "But I did drink it. insisted Lisa with a frown. If you had been drinking, you would have been lying in the next bunk with Vanessa. They were warming the bench, cheekily the defense attorney, trying to piss Lewin off. Later, Vanessa and the other girls from the theater testified. That's when Lisa realized she'd been wasting her time paying attention to anyone but. She had made enemies and envious people. They blatantly lied, accusing Lisa of hating Vanessa. I remember during rehearsal, she pushed Vanessa, and she nearly fell into the orchestra pit, the girl remarked. Lisa gasped. Actually, she rushed over to Alice to keep her from falling. The girl tripped during the dance rehearsal and lost her balance. Vanessa asked not to tell anyone about this unfortunate misunderstanding, so that she would not be removed from the role of understudy. Lisa had no idea what kindness would come out of it, and what rumors were floating around the theater. However, Lisa believed to the last that she would not be judged, except that Vanessa's parents turned out to have many more connections than the Lewin family. As a result, she ended up behind bars. What about your husband? Nancy asked. Did your husband end up not believing you? I see he doesn't come to see you. It's just my mom who brings the parcels. Robert said something during the trial that really got to me, Lisa admitted at the end. He said I would never poison Vanessa out of jealousy, because I never loved him. But out of jealousy of the scene one could. Then he looked me in the eyes and I realized how much pain and anger there was in him. He was angry because I couldn't love him and throw him out of my heart. First love, he hated that about me, so he decided that no one should get me. And here I am alone. You are not alone, smiled Nancy. She then began to fall asleep under the influence of the medication given by the doctor. Stephen was standing next to Lisa. She realized that he was listening to everything, but she didn't worry about it. It was even easier. Is she going to be all right? Lisa asked. She'd been wandering around all night with a fever. A scratch at that age can be fatal. But Nancy's all right. She's hanging in there. Of course, we'd better get her to a hospital. Who'd let her? She's lucky she thought to put on a jacket. The knife missed her, though the blow was severe. No major organs were hit. Lisa turned to Stephen. He was standing in a white doctor's coat with his hands in his pockets. Lisa didn't mean to, but smiled as if to an old friend. The handsome face of her former lover was like a ray of light in this dark, gloomy realm. Stephen, however, didn't smile back. You need to get out of here. There's no telling how many more attempts there will be to get rid of you. Nancy told me everything. Earl's inmate was more than a little angry. She blackmailed Christopher for another page to get a duplicate key to your cell. That kind of attitude is scary. Nancy thinks someone's hired you. The case involves more than a little bit of Lisa Poe's detainee animosity. Easy for you to say. Are you suggesting I spoon dig? He shook his head, then sat down in front of Lisa and took her hands in his. Lisa flinched, but didn't take her palms away. Her body felt as if an electric shock had gone through her. Listen carefully. We're going to help you. Okay, I got you out of here. But this will only be the beginning. You have to prove your innocence. You can't hide forever. Can I? I don't know. Mumbled Lisa, blushing. Stephen's fingers stroked her palms, making the butterflies that had long since slept, if not died, flutter again. Do you trust me? He asked insistently. I have a choice of allies here, a few, Lisa replied, lowering her gaze. Especially those who are skillful at revenge. Stephen smiled, then sushi. During the night, Lisa started moaning, so much so that Jenka woke up. She climbed down from her skates, tired of listening to her friend's sobs. What's wrong with you? God forbid you get stabbed. Does your stomach hurt? No strength. I'm sorry, Lisa sang. She'd been a performer in a musical, but she was doing great now. Miranda touched her face. It was wet. Her hair stuck to her suits. Lisa had washed with soda water before. A doctor was called. Lisa was taken to the infirmary. And there began the scariest part of the plan for the girl. Stephen explained that they would not let her go to the clinic so easily, so the man diagnosed her and made a cut on her stomach. And then what was the floor for? Only then did the doctor call the warden. Look, I did the best I could under these conditions. He demonstrated the scar. However, she needs full treatment and urgently. Otherwise, I'll have to write to the highest authority. There's a lot of noise around her. The supervisor shrugged her lips. I can't. Let me take her to my father's clinic to fix her up. We'll have her back in a week, Stephen suggested. We'll do it quietly. For a while, the boss was still resistant. But Stephen was too charming a man. A man like that, a woman could never refuse a request. And so Lisa found herself in a spacious ward under supervision. Stephen came to see her the next day. There's a guard on duty at the entrance. He will leave in 1 hour exactly, he announced, handing her a medical gown. Change and leave. There will be a black car waiting for you. Lisa did not argue. She realized it was better to trust Stephen completely and go with the flow. When the girl pulled the robe on, he turned away. She only grinned when she was done with changing clothes. Lisa turned to the savior. Thank you. He turned around, shook his head. It's too early to say thank you. When are we all done? Who are we? The woman frowned, unaware that someone else had been privy to the plans. The man grinned, you'll find out. At the appointed time, Lisa ran out of the hospital and into the car that was waiting for her. She literally fell into the back seat, gasping with excitement. What a spectacular appearance. You're definitely an entertainer, not a circus performer, poked the girl driver and hit the gas pedal. Lisa looked out from behind the seat and marveled. You? Molly glanced in the rearview mirrors. Who were you hoping to see? Vin Diesel from Fast and Furious. But forgive me graciously that your precious ass isn't being saved by him. Why aren't you helping them? You, Molly marveled. Self-importance. Actually, I'm helping my big brother. I thought you looked at him differently, Lisa grudgingly admitted. Molly, entering the corner abruptly, poked loudly. You have too rich an imagination. I just saw the way he fought back when you ran away from the wedding and disappeared for a month. He told you you were an idiot, and you came back with a ring on your finger without giving him a chance. At first I was glad. I thought he'd get over it, forget about you. But it wasn't happening. Stephen just got worse and worse, not realizing what he saw in you. But my brother loves you, so he got a job in circulation to keep an idiotic eye on you. Lisa's lips trembled with the urge to reply to Molly that she loved her brother too. But Lisa clenched her teeth, realizing that Molly wasn't the one who needed to hear those words. He's gone to jail. Because of me? She interjected. Molly rolled her beautiful eyes. And you think he just decided to change jobs, so to speak? The man got tired of the big money in the private clinic. He wanted a thrill. Are you really that naive, or are you just kidding? Lisa pressed her palms to her face. She even agonized thinking about Stephen. You didn't relax too much there. Molly pulled her out of the house. You're staying with me for a while. Stephen, you don't want to draw attention to yourself. And then we have to figure out how to get justice. You can't always be in hiding. It's one way to change your name, though. Did the exterior go to Cuba? No, Lisa cut her off decisively. I know what I want to do. Will you help me? Molly grinned, asking. Vanessa Alfort walked backstage at the theater. The girl had not been here before so deafeningly she bit her lips nervously. Tonight, after rehearsal was over, she had received a bouquet of scarlet roses and a strange letter that had been left in the dressing room. She didn't believe Lisa had written it, but who else would know about her affairs? There was only one line, a quote from a musical. If you lead them on by the nose, they don't realize you're cheap. And a place and time where they'd be waiting for her. And Lisa's signature. Vanessa looked around, but no one was there. Then she heard a rustle, then juice, 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 a woman's heels and silence. Vanessa got angry. Well, who's here? This isn't funny, she declared. She heard a woman's laughter in response. The acoustics of the stage and the specialty artists. Couldn't hear a word coming from the audience, but they could hear each other perfectly. Vanessa realized that the sender of the letter was somewhere nearby, but it was too dark. Come here, she sighed at the letter. What is the meaning of this? Who gave you the right? A click. A spot of soft light appeared on the stage. Vanessa Glass stepped out there, then took a step back. The letter fell out of her trembling hand. Standing on the stage was Lisa, dressed as the main character in the one whose role Vanessa had taken from her. She smiled haughtily and stared into Vanessa Alfort's face. Shaking. What are you doing? Why are you here? You're supposed to be in jail. Why do you think the innocent should be behind bars? Lisa grinned, taking a step forward. The singer moved gracefully, smoothly, as if she were swimming toward the victorious Vanessa. "They let you go," Alfort whispered. "Maybe," Lisa shrugged. "Or maybe I escaped to meet you in person. You know, prison taught me a few things, like how to fight back. Want me to show you? Stay away from me." Waze chased Foxy down the fall. "What do you want?" Lisa shook her head. "Were you shaking like that?" However, at the trial lied, confidently hid her tears in a handkerchief. "You weren't even afraid to drink poison just to get rid of me?" "That was a risky move." "Then why are you so afraid of me now?" Then Lisa stretched his lips in a crazy grin. "I get it. Do you understand what I want to do? You feel you don't have much left. I got nothing left to lose. I'm going back behind bars anyway. Only this time for real crimes, not your fairy tale." "What?" Vanessa stammered, looking up at the woman looming over her. "What are you up to?" Lisa raised the hand she had been hiding in the folds of her dress. Vanessa clapped, yelped, and seeing the gun, Lisa pointed it at the girl. "No, don't, I beg you. I'll do anything you want." Alfort cried. Lisa pretended to think about it. Then she nodded. "I want to hear the truth. Then I'll probably give you a chance, or at least two, counting to 10 before I pull the trigger." Vanessa, punctuated by wet palms against the stage floor, slid under her elbows, nodded. Okay. She screamed hysterically. "I'll tell you everything. Yes, I drank the poison myself. After we had tea, I put it in your warnig. What was I supposed to do? Robert only had eyes for you, and you raised us. I loved him. You had everything I wanted, you know? Everything. A man's main role. Glory, pay attention. And instead of getting the lead by working hard, you decided to push me around. Wouldn't it have been easier to poison me and go to jail?" Poked Vanessa angrily. "Look down. No, I wanted you to suffer, right, and then disappear. That's why I even paid those idiot newspapermen to be here." Vanessa ahead, realizing she had sold too much. Lisa was also surprised to learn that hating the Countess was the motive. "Did you order my death?" she asked deafeningly. "Do you realize that another person suffered instead of me? A beautiful woman. Her blood is on your hands." Vanessa loudly cried. Clutching her hands into her hair, she shrank into a ball. Lisa became disgusted. She understood that Vanessa was a spoiled, arrogant girl, the favorite of rich parents. She could only think of herself. Lisa took the gun off the safety. Vanessa jumped like a hare when she heard the hunter. "That you promised." "I lied," Lisa replied dryly and pulled the trigger. Vanessa screamed, but nothing happened. She gingerly opened her eyes and looked at Lisa, who grinned and said bang. Vanessa had no sooner opened her mouth than she heard a popping sound. The backstage area behind where the women were standing began to rise. There were more claps. They turned into a flurry of applause. Vanessa was startled to see that there were many spectators to their conversation. Even Robert was among them. It turned out that the man had believed the naive girl Vanessa too, but now he had learned the truth. Lisa threw a gun at her feet, which turned out to be a fake. "You wanted the lead role? Enjoy," she said, and then retreated away. She found Stephen standing in the shadows. He was picking up the backstage area and watching the woman with a burning gaze. Lisa hurried toward him, faltering in her stride, not saying a word. She threw herself around his neck and pressed her lips to his. Barely breaking the kiss, the woman whispered fervently, "I love you." "I'm sorry for everything. I love you so much." Stephen smiled. "And you forgive me, my love." Then Lisa had a hard time. After all, she had escaped from prison. But Vanessa's confession and witness testimony played their part. The charges against her were dropped. She apologized. Aunt Nancy was soon released from the colony. Her beloved husband Lisa was waiting for her on the outside, who made a decision to help the old people in everything and provide them with a happy old age. Lisa's life took a new turn. She was now afraid of little and tried to live life to the fullest. You never know when you might be put behind bars. Lisa was playing in Broadway musicals, just like she'd dreamed of as a child. This is her song. People laughed and cried ironically, but like the heroines of Chicago, she became famous and popular after the prison story. Today, however, 5 years after leaving prison, Lisa had her final role on stage waiting for her. After all, she recently found out that she is expecting a baby with her beloved husband, Stephen. Therefore, the singer decided to take time out in her career, because family was more important to her than anything else in this world. Yes, the love of Steve and Lisa began with deception. However, it passed all the tests. It ended by becoming simplistic and selfless. It's the kind of love you sing songs about, make movies about. Maybe someday they'll make a musical.